are the objectives for Iran?
Mr. President, who do you want to lead Iran?
Unbelievable statues, you'll see. You can come and look at them.
Mr. President!
Can you talk to us about Iran? Mr. President, we take questions on Iran. What's the statue?
Mr. President, what's your message to the families of the service members who were killed?
Something catastrophic is unfolding in the Middle East right now that the President of the United States is refusing to explain to the American people. 3 American service members are dead. Iranian strikes are hitting American military facilities across the region. Hezbollah has entered the conflict from Lebanon. Ballistic missiles are striking Jerusalem. U.S. bases in Iraq, Kuwait, and Bahrain are under attack. Markets are tanking. Oil prices are surging. And the commander-in-chief just landed at the White House, walked past reporters shouting questions about the dead soldiers, pointed at a statue in the Rose Garden, and said nothing. Nothing about the fallen service members' families. Nothing about the objectives that would justify their sacrifice. Nothing about what victory looks like. Nothing about how this ends. Just a statue. And then he went inside. Make sure you're subscribed to The John Brown Show, because what I am about to walk you through is not a foreign policy debate or a strategic disagreement about how to handle a difficult adversary. This is a real war, with real American deaths, spreading across a region that is now on fire in ways that military experts warned about for months before the first strike was ordered. And the man who ordered it cannot articulate to the press, to Congress, or to the American people what the goal actually is. Here is where things stand right now. Trump told reporters this conflict will last many, many weeks. That is not a mission accomplished framing. That is not the swift, decisive operation that social media posts and White House messaging described in the opening days. Many, many weeks, with 3 Americans already dead, with more losses described as likely in the same breath that delivered the news of the fallen, with Hezbollah now firing into Israel from Lebanon, opening a second front that every regional security analyst warned would materialize if the conflict escalated beyond its initial scope. Share this video because the specific words Trump used when addressing the deaths of American service members represent one of the most jaw-dropping statements any commander-in-chief has made about fallen soldiers in modern American history. He announced the deaths. He called them true American patriots who made the ultimate sacrifice. And then he said, there will likely be more before it ends. And then he said the words that made everyone watching stop and play it back to make sure they had heard correctly. That's the way it is. 3 Americans dead, families receiving the worst news of their lives right now. And the president who sent them into this conflict, who ordered the operation without the Allied support his own generals warned was essential, who dismissed military assessments about the complexity and risk of this engagement, described those deaths with the philosophical shrug of a man commenting on traffic. That's the way it is. Think about what those 4 words communicate to every military family in America, to every service member currently deployed in the region, to every allied nation watching whether American leadership takes the lives of its own soldiers seriously enough to explain why they were spent and what their sacrifice was supposed to achieve. Make sure you're subscribed because the absence of defined objectives is not a communications failure. It is the operational reality of a conflict that began without a clear strategic framework and is now expanding in directions that nobody in the administration appears to have planned for. Trump's video address referenced objectives without specifying them. Very strong objectives, objectives that will be achieved. Combat operations continuing until all objectives are accomplished. But in the weeks leading up to this conflict, the stated objectives shifted repeatedly. From stopping uranium enrichment to regime change to something else entirely, when Lindsey Graham, one of the most vocal advocates for aggressive action against Iran, went on television and said the goal is to change the threat, not the regime. Regime change, not regime change. Stopping enrichment, destroying capabilities, different objectives communicated publicly by different officials at different moments with no coherent framework tying them together into a strategy that military planners can execute or that the American public can evaluate. And Iran's foreign minister knows this. He made a statement that should be read very carefully by anyone trying to understand how this conflict might evolve. 2 decades of studying American military defeats in Afghanistan and Iraq. Lessons incorporated accordingly. A decentralized defense structure that cannot be neutralized by strikes on headquarters or capital cities. And the explicit claim that Iran, not the United States, will decide when and how this war ends. Share this video because the regional spread of this conflict is already exceeding the boundaries that administration officials described when defending the initial decision to strike. Iranian drone strikes successfully hit an American ammunition warehouse at a U.S. base in Iraq. The secondary explosions and fires were extensive. A U.S. naval support facility in Bahrain, home of the Navy's 5th Fleet, sustained strikes. Multiple fires were burning. Drone strikes hit a U.S. base in Kuwait. Clashes erupted near the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad between protesters aligned with Iranian interests and Iraqi security forces. Ballistic missiles struck Jerusalem. Every one of those incidents represents an escalation beyond the contained bilateral exchange that the initial framing suggested. Iran is not absorbing strikes and waiting for diplomacy. Iran is hitting American assets across multiple countries simultaneously. Every base, every facility, every naval installation that American forces depend on for operations in the region is now potentially a target in a conflict whose geographic boundaries are expanding in real time. Think about what happens to oil supply chains, to shipping lanes, to the global energy market when a conflict involves strikes on facilities near one of the world's most important naval choke points. Brent crude jumped 13% in a single day. Gas prices that Trump claimed were below $2 a gallon in most states are about to surge in ways that will be visible to every American at every pump in every state. The stock market futures tanking before the next trading session opens. Make sure you're subscribed because what is happening simultaneously in Ukraine and between Pakistan and Afghanistan reveals that the international security environment is not containing this conflict, it is compounding it. Ukraine struck a major Russian port facility in a significant escalatory move at exactly the moment when American attention and military resources are concentrated on Iran. Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues escalating. Pakistan and Afghanistan are now in active conflict. The world is not a stable backdrop against which a contained Iran operation is playing out on a manageable timeline. It is multiple simultaneous military crises demanding attention and resources from a global superpower that is now committed to a conflict of undefined duration with undefined objectives. Many weeks, Trump said, while 3 other crises are simultaneously demanding military attention. While allied nations that would normally share the burden of regional security have distanced themselves from this administration's foreign policy, while the chairman of the Joint Chiefs had been warning before the first strike that critical munitions shortfalls would create serious operational risks. Share this video because the 30,000 Iranian protesters who were encouraged to take to the streets by American officials earlier in this administration and were then left to face the Iranian government's response deserve to be part of this story. Trump and Netanyahu are broadcasting directly into Iranian television networks, transmitting messages encouraging the Iranian people to take back their country. The same framing that preceded the protest crackdown where thousands of demonstrators died after American support failed to materialize. The same approach of encouraging regime opposition from people who will bear the consequences of that encouragement while American military assets operate from safe distances. The Iranian people who do not support the Islamic Republic are not simply waiting for American broadcasts to inspire them. They are watching a foreign military bomb their capital, watching a hospital get hit, watching an elementary school for girls get destroyed. The population that American broadcasts are appealing to is experiencing American and Israeli strikes in their cities. The gap between what the broadcasts are saying and what those people are living through is not a messaging challenge. It is the fundamental strategic incoherence of trying to liberate a population by bombing it. Think about what only 27% of Americans supporting this military action means for the political sustainability of a conflict that Trump says will last many weeks. 27%, not a majority, not even close to a majority. Less than 3 in 10 Americans approve of this war. a war that is killing American service members, a war that is causing oil prices to spike and markets to tank, a war being prosecuted without articulated objectives, a war whose commander-in-chief responds to the deaths of soldiers with a philosophical shrug and redirects questions to a statue. The political math of a conflict this unpopular, extending over many, many weeks while midterm elections approach, is not complicated. Every week of an undefined war with undefined objectives and mounting American casualties is another week of 60% disapproval becoming 65. Another week of independent voters who were already 47 points underwater with this president, moving further in the direction the polling data is already documenting. Make sure you're subscribed because the contrast between how this commander-in-chief is treating fallen service members and how every previous commander-in-chief has treated them is the part of this story that should be receiving wall-to-wall coverage from every news organization in the country. Reporters surrounded the president as he returned to the White House. Questions were shouted about the 3 dead Americans, about the objectives, about whether he would address the nation directly rather than through social media posts, about whether this will become an endless war. The president walked past them, pointed at a statue, said, "Look how great this is," and went inside. No message to the families, no explanation to the press, no address to the nation. Social media posts about Lady Gaga's father, a Truth Social video with vague references to very strong objectives, and that's the way it is. The entire communication apparatus of the presidency deployed to say essentially nothing while American soldiers die and American bases burn, and the region expands its involvement in a conflict that was supposed to be swift and decisive. A president who avoided military service himself through multiple deferments now says that American service members dying in a war he started with undefined objectives is just the way it is, and then declined to answer a single question from the press while 3 American families were receiving notifications that their loved ones would not be coming home. Share this video because the markets opening on whatever number the futures are pointing toward right now will be the most visible economic consequence of this conflict reaching everyday Americans this week, but it will not be the last. Oil at $82 a barrel and rising. Futures markets tanking across every major index. Supply chain disruptions in one of the world's most strategically significant regions. Allied nations that would normally help stabilize these situations, actively reducing their economic dependence on American trade and cooperation, rather than stepping in to help manage the consequences. Many, many weeks, with 3 dead already, with more described as likely, with objectives that shift depending on who is speaking, with a commander-in-chief pointing at statues while reporters ask about fallen soldiers. The world is on fire, and the man holding the match cannot explain why he lit it or when he plans to put it out. This story is just getting started. Stay tuned.